Again, folks, you are on track 2 of day 3. And if you'd like to go to either track 1 or track 3, just go to ahc2021.com, and that'll allow you to link into other tracks as well. Although we'd like you to stay on our track for the duration. Our next presentation is actually a group of speakers that'll talk a little bit about the session discussing the use of Commercial Routing Assistance, or CRA app, which provides the latest information which is relevant to commercial organizations and drivers, state transportation officials, as well as regulators, federal transportation officials, trade associations who rely upon continuous vehicle movement to meet their mission. Boy, we really saw this in action during the coronavirus, as we've seen various states implement their orders that may conflict with other states. Do they allow trucks from other states to cross into their state boundaries? So this is really definitely a timely and relevant topic. Our speakers include Gregory McShane, Integrated Operations Division, Strategy, Policy, and Resources with CISA DHS. Timothy Klett, who's the Infrastructure Assurance and Analysis with INAL, the Idaho National Laboratory. And finally, Ali Gagnon, the third, Chief Strategist and Relationship Manager, also with the Idaho National Lab. And so with that, I'll turn that over to the speakers.
Thanks, George. This is Greg. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Coming in loud and clear.
All right, great. Let me just do a quick intro. Greg McShane, CISA IOD. I've been working with the organization going on 15 years now. My current role is focused on IT strategy, focusing in on IT system requirements to the actual implementation, basically cradle to grave, supporting CISA Central, which is our operations group that covers the cyber, physical watch operations, the communications, the emergency support functions 2, which is the communications part of it, and then ESF 14, which is the sector, cross-sector, dependency, interdependency under our IOD emergency response operations. And then I'll just quickly turn it over to Ali to do an intro on him.
I'm sorry. Ali Gagnon, Idaho National Lab. Can you hear me okay?
You're not coming in that clearly, Ali. You want to try that again, maybe adjusting your volume?
Yeah, how does it sound now? Any better?
Much better.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello, everybody. Ali Gagnon, Idaho National Lab. I'm the Chief Strategy and Relationship Management. And I've been at Idaho National Lab for 3 years. And before that, I was with the same agency that Greg is with for 13 years with DHS. And our focus is to talk a little bit about one of the capabilities developed at INL in partnership with the All HACCP Consortium and CISA. And with that, I'll let Tim introduce himself.
Thank you, Ali. I'm Tim Klett, and throughout my 20-year career within the National Lab complex, I've supported several different areas within DHS, a lot of overlap with the missions that both Greg and Ali have been in, developing innovative solutions to help the various missions throughout DHS. And with that, I'll go back to Greg.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Ali. I want to give a little bit more background before we actually talk the commercial routing application. We all know that CISA has a very broad mission to protect the national critical infrastructure from any physical or cyber threats. Where we fall in the integrated operations part is really hones in a little bit more on the how we share information, how we share data, our products delivery, and things of that nature. The capability we were looking into, really just gets back to some of the and leverages a lot of the CISA public-private partnerships with the All HACCP Consortium through initially what they called the NIP Challenge, National Infrastructure Protection Plan Challenge, about 3 years ago. and expanded to include the Idaho National Labs, really with the focus on solving operational problems with the use case approach to support a lot of the response recovery events, such as weather events, hurricane, flooding, things of that nature. Some of the specific use cases really hone in on supply chain issues, lodging, fuel availability, restoration, pre-staging, damage assessments, re-entry, fiber cuts, things of that nature. We really like the use case approach. It's defining the problem you're trying to solve, bringing the right people to the table, having the right authoritative data sets, the right processes in place, and using the right technology. It's a recipe for success. And we found with the CRA, this was one that we really hit pay dirt on, and it's in operational capability, and we're excited that we've gotten to that point. It was almost like the moons were all aligned in the right way and implemented for that response recovery. So so a little bit more on the backstory. Let's turn the clock back and let me paint the picture for the commercial routing application tool. I was on a leadership call. I was asked to be on a leadership call. Specifically, they were really, it was the beginnings of COVID-19, states implementing travel restrictions, stay-at-home orders, organizations just trying to get their arms around the whole COVID situation. So the ask from the CISA director was minimize the threat or impact to the supply chain. And further conversations, we were approached by the Deputy Associate Director to really develop a tool capability to identify the most effective route, the least restrictive for traveling from state to state, very similar to developing a pre-flight planning for a pilot. So we took that to the table, brought the right people. We knew we had the right people at the table. We had Ollie's team, Tim, CISA, folks within IOD, the operational folks. So the use case was pretty much defined, exactly that. So the plan of action was really the first to define that problem set, identify and start collecting restricted data available from some of the state to state via some of our regional offices, the tools, technology approach, further defining the requirement, potential solutions, and the audience that can actually utilize this solution. We really didn't know exactly where we were going with this, but we had a good idea. So the data collection was pretty clumsy, very difficult to consolidate, making it almost ineffective to feed the tool. Where we really found success was that the National Government Association was doing exactly what we were doing amongst many other organizations across the country, was to really consolidate a lot of this information and data in one place. So we were able to feed the information and data from the National Government Association into the tool and capability that we're developing. And we had the right technology, which Tim and Ollie can get into a little bit more of the details. And we kept refining the processes to present and display the information and data. So 2 weeks later, we had a capability. We were presented to CISA leadership, and 2 weeks after that, we got approvals to do this and roll it out. So turned out to be a great capability for the transportation planners, logistics professionals, and drivers traveling from point A to point B that may find it confusing and difficult to select and navigate transportation routes and know which states would have restrictions in place. So the commercial app's a free app, incorporates and coordinates a lot of the data streams and plots multiple routes for options and planning and managing commercial vehicle movements across multiple states and times of restricted operations quickly. And it's a tool that we're planning on not just using for steady state, but also during response to recovery. So let me just turn it back over to Ollie. He can walk through some of the different capabilities, and then I think Tim is going to do a quick demo on it. So over to you, Ollie.
All right, thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. And as Greg mentioned, the Cyber Security Infrastructure Security Agency and our partnership with them. And for those who don't know much about Idaho National Lab, the first question may pop in your head is, why Department of Energy Laboratory doing this type of work for the Department of Homeland Security working with the All Hazards Consortium? Well, really,
hey, Ollie, if I can interrupt you for a second, please, can you get a little closer to the mic? I'm having a little bit of a problem coming you through.
How are we doing now? Any better?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry for that. Bad speaker, Dave. So, and again, Idaho National Lab, as one of the Department of Energy laboratories, our partnership with DHS goes back many years. So it wasn't with this particular application, was the first time we've been working with DHS, and they were looking for someone with some technical capabilities to solve this challenge. Actually, it goes back to the stand-up of the Department of Homeland Security with the Homeland Security Act of 2002, when the agency was stood up with the many components. And in the act itself, it calls for, instead of DHS establishing their own laboratories, they can leverage the Department of Energy laboratories. Now, Idaho National Lab, obviously we're known for securing America's energy future. We're looking at nuclear and also the electric grid. But that mission over the years has really transpired where we become a center of specialization and excellence when it comes to cyber and physical security and resilience. And if much what a laboratory does, our national laboratory, we're government-owned but contractor operated. And really, kind of the unofficial of what a national lab does is we do the things that the private sector can't do, won't do, or probably shouldn't do. Now, this particular success with the commercial routing assistance application is really more about our organization really working with and understanding the needs of DHS, CISA, and the private sector and organizations like the All Hazard Consortium that we work with over the years on security and resilience type issues, whether it's cyber and physical. So this was a challenge. And as Greg pointed out, it was something that came from the director at the time in the midst of the COVID pandemic and the transportation issues. And how can we make this process more effective and efficient to help the flow of goods and critical supplies for COVID? But as Greg pointed out, this really applies to other use cases. In fact, it was rolled out also during the tail end of the hurricane season. And there's a lot of other situations or incident scenarios that the application can be used. In fact, without going too far into it, we're actually, it's being modified for internal INL use with our source recovery mission. And there's interest in other areas in different use cases. So what was rolled out in a very, very short amount of time, about a week from the problem or the challenge coming into the laboratory. And of course, we were in this relationship, and really it's about collaboration. As Greg pointed out, it was really lining up, the moons lined up on this one, where CISA with their national mission had the challenge, working with the private sector, monitoring critical infrastructure, supporting response and recovery operations. They had the national mission. We had the technical solution, and the All Hazards Consortium obviously had the data through their sensitive information sharing environment, so they had that embedded data. So it wasn't anything that wasn't already out there. It was a matter of putting the puzzle pieces together to come up with the application in a very short amount of time, which in government terms is a very, very fast amount of time. So the core focus is saving costs of logistics, maintaining those supply chains. CRA really in terms of where it's at, where it's going. We're already looking at things like real-time updates from drivers and dispatchers. Greg mentioned other use cases for the application. What you really want it to be is where it will be in the end, whether it's a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 10 years is a flexible application where depending on where you sit, whether you're an independent trucker with your own truck and supporting a contract in an incident scenario, or you're a major trucking operation with dispatch centers across all sectors, not just health, health and healthcare. It applies to many, many other sectors on very different use cases, whether it's a hurricane, earthquake, flooding, ice storm, whatever it may be that's impacting the country or region of the country. You want to be able to leverage data and be able to use that to efficiently and effectively move cargo for whatever the need is. So there's a lot that was done with it in a very, very short amount of time. But really, in the end, it was about the collaboration. And in fact, a measure for a lab for us is really are our customers, or our clients, and our long-term clients like CISA and our partners like the All Hazards Consortium, did we deliver on what they were trying to achieve in that outcome? The feedback we got from the CRA since it's been out has been, phenomenal. It's been great, and there's a lot of promise on what it can do. For us internally at the lab, not as important as really coming and solving the complex challenges and supporting others' mission is, how do we rack and stack within the laboratory? And in fact, this week, if you think about a national laboratory with a nuclear mission and many other very, very smart people running around the laboratory that I leverage, like Tim, who's going to speak next, is your research and development, lab worthy? In fact, this week, the CRA just was awarded the Laboratories Director's Mission Advancement for Partnership and Collaboration Award for 2020. So for us, that's great from our peers within the laboratory system, but really to us, it's just an extension of the collaboration that happened with CISA and the All Hazards Consortium. And as I mentioned, what the lab does, the CRA is just one of many things that we do as a national laboratory to support the national homeland security, cyber and physical, when it comes to security and resilience. But this is a great example of what can be done if you bring the right people together with the right data and the right technical expertise to solve a complex challenge. And with that, I really want to save a good amount of time for Tim Klett, who's one of the primary developers of the application on our team, and let Tim give you a demonstration of what the CRA can do. Then I'll come back and tell you how you can leverage the CRA and get some more information. And with that, Tim, let me turn that over to you.
Great, thanks, Ali. Hopefully everyone is seeing my screen now. Let me know if that's not the case.
Yep, it's coming through, Tim. Thank you.
Okay, great. So before I walk everyone through, the ins and outs of the website, I wanted to touch on a concept that both Ali and Greg mentioned, which is the use case approach that we used as we thought about how to implement this technology. And really there was several key factors that we kept in mind, and primarily the first factor was the intended audience. And with that, we knew that we were going to have really two discrete types of users in terms of a usability standpoint. One are your classic desktop users, which would be your analysts or dispatchers that would be needing to access this information. But then in addition to that, and probably more importantly, are the mobile users, which are the drivers that are in transit, moving critical products across the country that may be impacted by limiting factors that vary state by state, getting those critical products across the country, any limitations or declarations that may impede or make their path a little bit easier. So again, the intended audience was really a critical driver for how we designed this interface, and we'll explore how we did just that as we walk through the site. Additionally, the data is also very important. In terms of the data, we thought about availability, the currency, and the confidence of the data. So the data has to be accurate. It's got to be timely. It's got to be attributable to the source. And this was key. We partnered with the All Hazards Consortium, and we're able to leverage their operational readiness levels, or the ORL, where they were really our definitive source. So this website is talking directly to an AHC leveraged data set. They diligently updated the underlying data on a nightly basis, getting their information primarily from National Governors Association. There's disparate data sets that have to be brought together, right? And so one website that you're looking at now really has, up to 50 or 60 different data sources that the All Hazards Consortium was collating for us, and we were bringing together through this one interface. In addition to that, we we built in mechanisms to have, in the absence of that particular resource that the All Hazards Consortium was providing to us, if that went down or became unavailable for any reason, we did have a process that would cache that information on a nightly basis. So no matter what, we're providing some level of detail regardless of the availability of that particular service. And then finally, Ali kind of touched on this, Greg did too. One of the things that went into how we designed this was flexibility. This capability was developed in response to a need that arose out of the COVID-19 pandemic. We knew that a route planning utility had applicability to other use cases such as hurricane response and recovery and what have you. And we hope to be able to leverage that for those particular use cases as well. So with that being said, let's dive into the interface. What we're looking at now is the overview page, which provides rolled up metrics for the attributes available within the commercial routing assistance application. So you can see here, we've got sort of these different bins of data categories. And really these categories can be broken out into two high-level data sets, if you will. Those that are applicable to truck routing, such as state driver's license, agency closures, increased size and weight limits, and what have you. And then the other are government actions, such as limits on gatherings, school closures, curfews, and what have you. And one of the nice things about this is you can click on any of these data elements, and you'll be quickly taken to a map where you can see on a state-by-state basis which states have those particular, in this case, curfews. We can see here that several states do not have a curfew, wherein also several have localized curfews in place. So things that may be of interest to the people that are providing routes to drivers or the drivers themselves in the field. You can come in here and quickly get an overview of the particular data set. So if I'm looking at increased size and weight limits, here's the states that do not have an increase. And we'll talk about the different colors and what went into the thought process behind those, as well as we talk about the state information page. So with that being said, let's dive into the state information page. And we can see here that there's a few different sections that I'll highlight. We talked about the different types of information, truck routing and government actions kind of being the two high-level types of data. So I can unselect government actions and really just focus in on those data elements that are applicable to truck routing. And then if I'm only focused on a particular truck routing attribute such as rest stops, I can turn off the other data elements, and now I'm looking at just those states that have rest stops or parking closures. You can quickly toggle between those two and turn those on and off through the mechanisms there in those drop boxes. The map area, we kind of touched on this. It's a color-coded representation based on the selected data of obviously the US states and territories. The custom design of the map is intended to put less of an emphasis on area and more on the general visibility and display of the information. So you can see here, we can actually see Rhode Island on this map versus it being dwarfed by its sister states. Clicking on any particular state will add that to the, I can click on a set of states here, and you'll see that this subway map area that I'll discuss next gets highlighted. So I can really come in here and choose a custom route if I'd like to. And as I click on those states, we can see that this area here has a list of the data elements that I have selected. So I can turn off different data options, and the states and their applicable attributes that are in place for those states are shown. And the idea here is to give the user a sense of the path of least resistance, if you will. So as you traverse through these states that I have selected, and the idea here would be to look for, the greenest path, if you will, because we put together custom decision analysis approach to determine how the data attributes are binned, with an emphasis on safety or ease of access for the driver. For example, if a state does not have a CDL expiration extension, that could serve as a potential impediment for the driver, and therefore that attribute is rendered in red. Conversely, states that have increased size and weight limits provide an easier path, and therefore that attribute would be represented in green. And the legend area kind of shows those different ranges and the colors that are applicable to the different specifics within those particular data elements. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to that use case approach that Greg referenced. So let's walk through a particular use case wherein critical products have been delivered to the U.S. And they've arrived at the port of Los Angeles in Long Beach. And the driver of those particular goods needs to get them to the city of Philadelphia. So I'm going to start to type in a city's name or a state's name or any destination, and it'll auto-complete with the destinations that fit that criteria. So I've entered Los Angeles, and then I'll select Philadelphia. And you'll notice that what happens is we've got a predetermined route here. And for this particular scenario, let's just look at truck routing data attributes. And we can see that there are 3 different routes that were returned that I could potentially traverse to get from Los Angeles to Philadelphia. And now I can begin to kind of dive into the analysis of okay, how would I want to plan my route given my current situation? And so I see here that there's a southern route that would take me, through Texas, Arkansas, and Tennessee. Or there's alternatively a northern route. I can select that, and I would instead go through more of the Midwestern states to get into Philadelphia. So now let's further dive into the use case, and let's consider that my CDL is expired, right? So now I'm worried about that potentially being an impact. So which routes would I potentially which routes would benefit me if I'm really focused on not having to worry about my expired CDL? So we can see that this northern route, well, I'd be going through Utah, which does not have extensions. Let's take a look at the middle route. Well, in that case, I'm going to be going through New Mexico. There's some limits on that. I'd have to kind of dig into that a little bit more, but it seems like a little bit better of a route. And then similarly, the southern route, I'd be going through Arkansas, which does not have extensions. So I might want to avoid that route as well. But let's go back to what I had mentioned earlier, where I can kind of pick and choose different states. So I'm going to go my own custom route. So I don't have to deal with any states that have, limitations on my CDL being expired. So I'm going to get rid of Utah. I'm not going to go through there. I'm going to take a bypass and go through from Nevada to Idaho, and then into Wyoming, down into Colorado, and then Nebraska. So I can create my own custom route tailored to my specific situation, given my current set of circumstances. And you notice that as I turn states on and off, the route warnings area will kind of highlight some of those key truck routing attributes and give me a roll-up of the counts of the states along the route that fall into the various categories. Now let's take a look at the detailed information page. And really what this is it's providing a textual view of the same information that was rendered on the state information page on the map. The states along the route are listed as rows, as you can see here, from the origination down to the destination. And you could see that I've added some custom states along the route there. And then where applicable, the data elements are hyperlinked directly to the source of information where the All Hazards Consortium team had found that information. So if I was interested in learning more about those SDLA closures within the state of Nebraska, I can click this link and get taken directly to where I can and provided with additional information on which of those particular locations are maybe closed or are open. So going back to what we mentioned before about the operational readiness level, or the ORL from All Hazards Consortium, we have that full attribution of where that information came from, and then a direct link to where that information is, so that more details can be obtained. We also have the ability, if necessary, we can export this information out to a spreadsheet. So if you wanted to have a copy of that, if I'm a dispatcher working with a team of drivers, I can create their routes and export that to CSV if that's required as well. Finally, we have a summary information page, which will again provide that roll-up of information, again, just with those states that were along the route that was selected. So I can see here that 3 of the states that I'm going to traverse through do not have an increase in their size or weight limits. But in my particular case of being mostly concerned with my expired CDL, all of the states that I'll go through have extensions. So I should run into no issues on that front. Now I'm going to go back to the overview page, and I'm going to touch on one of the types of audience within the intended audience of the user base, which is those that are on a mobile device. So I just switched my browser to be that of an iPhone 10, right? And I can switch my mode from portrait to landscape, but this is still the live website, right? And so this is like we're viewing it on an iPhone 10, and the same exact functionality is there. I can scroll through and find the high level data points. I can click on a given attribute and I'm taken to the map for that particular data attribute. I can go back to the state information page, and I have the ability to, if we're wanting to go to Los Angeles to New York City, I can type that in on my phone. It's going to automatically route for me. It's going to have the same type of behavior as if I were on the desktop, but I'm allowed to utilize my mobile device for the user input and what have you. I can select different routes. Really the exact same functionality, but it's a responsive design, and it's one that will be effective whether I'm in sitting at a computer as a dispatcher or working as a truck driver on the road. So as I mentioned before, that was key to our design and thought process as we thought about how to make this capability applicable to the broadest user base and really make it usable whether you're on a computer or a mobile device. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Ali.
Hey, Tim, can you go back to the overview?
Sure.
So one thing I want to point out for our audience is you might ask a couple questions as you're listening to the presentation. Go, well, why don't I see a turn-by-turn rendition of the route? One of the challenges, and we're working through CISA, through the Department of Transportation, is there are several different types of route restrictions that happen. For example, a bridge outage or a weight limitation on a certain road. That's a lot of different information. So that's a challenge for the next evolutions of the CRA, being able to integrate that. So what you're seeing in the routes is basically major interstate routes from state to state. So think of this in a state-to-state transportation format. We already realized that there could be great benefits, for example, in a use case where actually I'm in Florida and hurricane season, the issue may be moving from a staging area in the Panhandle of Florida down to the Southeast Florida area. So now you're dealing with a county by county type situation. So county level data is also important. We're already looking at and working on, state 511 information to be able to integrate that. But the overall challenge is this. We want to be able to not increase the burden on the user, what Tim just showed you, but increase the amount of information that can be leveraged through the tool. And that's a tough challenge. And but that's the kind of things that INO likes to focus on. It's a complex challenge. And then you start talking about you want to tailor this to the user. You can actually funnel the user at some point with the right information and the right user interfaces. If I'm an independent truck driver, I may have a very different perspective on what I'm trying to do and the information I need from all this vast information provided through All Hazards Consortium versus, say, FEMA that's moving to major logistical staging areas for an incident. Or if I'm a power company moving big trucks from the north to the south in hurricane season or from the south to the north in winter season. So all these things are talked about. And we get a lot of questions about, can it do this? Can you display this type of information? And the answer I always give, which still rings true today, is that if the information is available in a database, it can be extracted, integrated, and visualized. It doesn't matter what the data is. But the real challenge is, what is the use case and what kind of impact you're trying to get from the application? So Tim, I'm going to switch back to my screen.
Okay.
Okay, so thanks, Tim. Great demonstration as usual. So that kind of gives you a glimpse on how the CRA works. The last thing I just want to show you is how do I access it. A couple of ways you can access it. You can go directly to what Tim just showed you through cra.inl.gov. It's hosted by Idaho National Lab. You can also access it through our INL Resilience Optimization Center website. And there you see, as in this example, you can get to the application, and also the fact sheet resides on there. You also, on that website, the INL Resilience Optimization Center website, you can get information about many other things besides the CRA, but when you go to the CRA page that's being shown, you can get to the application, as I just mentioned, you can get the fact sheet, and then there's a bit more information on the website on the capability that's been developed to include what's available now and where the application is going in the future, and a little bit about our team that put it together. And again, I just want to close out, and Greg, I don't know if you have any more comments on it, but before questions. But again, I got to go back to that. The success of the CRA was really the collaboration. It was bringing the national mission, the data, and the technical capabilities together to solve a challenge. And it can only go up from here. There's a lot of promise with the CRA that is being discussed today. So with that, I will stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Ollie. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate the presentation and just the value of the tool and capability. And even from a CISA perspective, we've always been driving, to put an interactive capability together. No longer does it work, having that just repository where you just, store documents people can access. People need to see it right away. It's got to be real time, interactive, and that alone paint the picture and have a capability that shows and displays and solves the problem. I can't tell you even how helpful this was even early on when I actually had to go from Virginia all the way up to New York City, during COVID. And, we hadn't traveled in quite a bit of time, but when you got on the road, it was just like, wow, we need to know exactly what we're walking into, because you get into the Lincoln Tunnel, you don't know what's going to come out on the other side. So it was extremely helpful for me, and open to any call them opportunities or suggestions, how we can improve the tool. It's just fantastic. I mean, we get on our weekly All Hazards Consortium calls, and we talk to a lot of the other use cases. You mentioned a few, like just parking issues. Where can trucks park during a weather type event? What is there even parking available at some of the rest stops? So as we kind of tackle some of those challenges and issues, I think it really adds a lot more capability in driving to the next requirements for, adding on to version 2.0, 2.3, whatever that may be down the road. So with that, let me just turn it back to George. George, we're open for any questions.
Yeah, guys, thank you very much. I can't believe just what you guys have accomplished in such short a period of time. And I can't think of a better example of a collaborative partnership than this tool that worked among, the All Hazards Consortium, Idaho National Labs, and DHS CISA. I guess one question that I have is how rapidly updated do you get this information from the various states and certainly at the local government level as well?
You want to take that?
Yeah, sure. And I think I saw John Molnar on earlier, who's our colleague that is kind of managing that. It's updated on a nightly basis, and so really, if the National Governors Association is updating their sites, which is sort of a combination of the various data sources within their states, it kind of bubbles up into the data source that the All Hazards Consortium manages for us. So, it is updated nightly, but we're at the mercy of, how the states themselves are refreshing their own data sets. So as long as the states are, the websites or the resources that they're using to convey the latest information for themselves is updated, it's most likely going to bubble up to the data sources that the AHC is leveraging, and then in turn would come through the front end of the CRA.
Great, thank you, Tim. Another question is, if the next generation, if there is another generation, I'm sure there is, you guys have got to be working on it. Where do you see this evolving to? Is it something that you marry up with, for example, the Waze application systems and give you turn by turn, or where do you see this going?
Yeah, we don't want to, compete, so to speak, with the commercial sector and some of the capabilities that are out there in terms of, what's embedded within Google Maps or Waze, as you mentioned. But we want to provide a supplement to what they're doing. And so one of the use cases that we've discussed, and Ali kind of touched on it, in terms of, an incident response perspective, whether it be an outage of a bridge or what have you, getting down to the level of granularity within the county level, right? So this particular instance of CRA is focused at the state level. Getting into that county level where you can see, where one of the things that we thought about was, hotspots with COVID cases. If I'm high risk and I need to move, bringing in, Greg's example that he used early on, where he needed to get to his mom's house from the DC area to, upstate New York. And, you want to avoid those areas that had, high levels of COVID, marrying up with those real-time data sets, whether it be COVID Act Now or what have you, and allowing that information to flow through into the routing, capabilities so that the users could be aware of, where they might want to avoid, hey, I better not get gas in this county, just to sort of limit my exposure. So those are some of the things that we thought about.
Yeah, I would also add that it's really not us determining where it goes. It's going to be the users. An example I'll give you, after it was released and during hurricane season, I was driving with my daughter from San Antonio to Florida and went through Louisiana. And, besides the convoys of power trucks coming on the same road we were, when we get to the immediate 60-mile area where it impacted, just a line of trucks. Now, if you're in a situation using the CRA, you're on the route, I-10, that's the data's for. But what if you want a detour and you start getting into county roads and you need gas, you need lodging at some point? Is there road restrictions? Is there bridge outages? So it's really just, the data itself and be able to provide, vetted, useful data that for decision analysis. So the users is really the key customer for use for decision analysis, whether it's an independent trucker or it's a major trucking corporation or the federal government. And that's really going to determine where we go with this in this partnership.
Yeah, and those are great examples, Ali and Tim. I guess my concern or my thought is I can just see this evolving to a point where you can put in filters, for example, avoiding COVID hotspots, just like avoiding toll roads, or bridge construction or traffic jams and weather. The northern route, for example, may be hitting some blizzard conditions in Utah. So I think this is really left up to some imagination, but you guys have done a great job. And if information is power, this tool is a must, I think, for operational efficiencies for all businesses.
Yeah, I think you're right. You mentioned weather. Weather's one we want to integrate. So that's a great example of not competing with the private sector, but there are several other data feeds that can be integrated. And then based on the profile you're putting in there, you can navigate your route.
Yeah, and George, just one more thing is, just to give a real shout out to the All Hazards Consortium. A lot of this originated back when they put all those working groups together with the Fleet Response Working Group and kind of just getting it started. And that's particular to this app, but identifying those challenges and issues of those utility crews getting from Canada or Long Island down to Florida in the most effective and efficient way, because the clock starts. They start billing them the minute through some of those mutual aid assistance agreements. The minute they leave, their home base, getting down to the response area or recovery area. So, this is where it kind of originated from. The All Hazards Consortium. We just built on top of it. So, kudos.
And Greg, I couldn't have said it any better. And folks, if you haven't gotten the message yet, joining groups like the All Hazards Consortium and getting into the SICE working group, and you're going to learn a little bit as we talk a little bit further down the summit. The Endeavor working group in Pennsylvania, for example, it's a great forum when a business or industry has a challenge, has a hardship. How do they leverage their relationship with groups like INEL and CISA, DHS, and state governments? How do we solve the problems? How do we get our heads together and all work towards the same goal, making the problem go away without stepping on anyone's toes, regulations and that sort of thing aside? So this is a great example, such a useful tool, and I just see it, evolving into even more productive processes than you guys have already done. And kudos to all of you. Thank you very much. I don't see any questions. John, did you get any that I didn't happen to see?
I don't see any, George. But I think, like I said, I think the Ollie's team and Tim have just done a wonderful job here on this logistics distribution operations. Whether it's an actual trucking company or whether it's a food company, an electric company, all of these areas would pertain within this cross-sector arena that would be helpful for each of these groups. And I think even on the next session, you hear even more of another tool that is similar in nature that kind of shows people the way that needs to go across state lines. What are they getting into? What are they dealing with? And I think this just helps along that whole path to support those types of questions.
Yeah, and folks, do you have a sense for how many businesses and organizations have to date taken advantage of this tool? I mean, it's probably because a lot of them don't even know about it, but to date, I guess, do you have a sense for that number, percentage-wise or numbers?
We don't have attribution to any particular individual or organization, but we were kind of keeping track of the metrics. I don't know what the exact numbers are to date, but we had over 5,000 users probably within the first month or so. So it is being used. I think it's still being used to this day, but we don't have that kind of organizational attribution that you mentioned.
Yeah, that's still that's really impressive. Again, thank you very much to you all, to Ollie, Tim, Greg. We really appreciate your sharing that tool with all of us and your knowledge and experience with the group at the summit. Thank you very much.
Thanks, George. Thanks, John. Thanks, guys.
Pleasure.
Good guys. Thanks a lot, Greg.
Okay, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like we're about 15, 20 minutes ahead of schedule, so we can take a little virtual break here, as you can see.
They're actually taking a break anyway, so they'll get a little extra break. The next track will resume at 2:25. There will be a little bit of a video that you can watch if you're interested, and if you want to stay on this track. Again, it's another saying that the next presentation will be a variation of this logistics effort that I think will be as interesting as well. But yeah, George, it is 2:25 that everyone can return to and start the next session.
That sounds great. We'll see you in about 20 minutes.